Two, one, and we are recording with. Is it Dr. Mark Steffen, or would it be Senator Mark Steffen, or would it be Dr. Senator or Senator Doctor?
Well, exactly. All the above. My preferred moniker is Mark.
Okay.
That's what I was given when I was born. But yep, I am a Kansas State Senator and I am a medical doctor. I'm a board certified anesthesiologist, recently retired. Yep, Mark would be perfect.
Perfect. Anesthesiology is actually what I wanted to do. I graduated the University of Georgia in 2013. I got into medical school, and I
Oh,
I decided not to go after I got accepted. But what I wanted to do anesthesiology. That's what I volunteered for. Athens Regional Medical Center in Athens, Georgia. That's what I would shadow doctors for. I'd volunteer in the anesthesia unit. I thought psychopharmacology, neuropsychopharmacology, that stuff was my jam. I loved that. Like a normal,
that's cool.
like a
That's
normal
cool.
student.
We just basically poison people till they're just short of dying, and then we get them fixed up and then unpoison them. But I spent last 15 years of my career, I specialized in interventional pain management, which means I put needles near structures that you don't want to be moving around a lot while I do, but a lot of spinal injections, that sort of thing for folks with herniated discs, spinal stenosis, uh, vertebral body compression fractures. So mine was kind of an outpatient clinic scenario, which was great. It was a lot of fun while it lasted.
Do you miss it at all?
I've been asked that, and truthfully, I don't. I've got so many other things going on. I had a great run for 32 years, and and now I'm in the Senate. I farm and ranch here in Kansas. I have an oil business. I'm an oil and gas producer, and so what I lack for is free time, not things to do.
Hmm. Yeah, that was when I decided I didn't want to go to medical school. I kind of felt naked because I had put so much. I all day, every day is what I put into getting into it, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, as you know, and I now realize in hindsight, it's not that I really ever missed being pre-med. I missed that 24/7 endeavor towards some goal on the horizon. And it doesn't necessarily have to be you miss the job. I get it now with the podcast. I wake up and I work at this, always trying to improve video, audio quality, better guests, trying to interview better, always just trying to make it tip top. It doesn't have to be organic chemistry. It doesn't have to be podcasting. It could be ranching. It could be running an oil business. It could be being in the Kansas Senate. That's kind of just like a personal thing I found I love is
Yeah,
I don't like a whole lot of idle time.
yeah, and that's a great point. You get through undergraduate, you get through medical school, you get through residency. I started my private practice, and it was kind of like, man, what mountain am I going to climb next? I got to have a mountain to climb. Yeah, that you're so right. It's been a long time ago for me because I kept finding mountains, but there for a while, out of my residency, my practice is running smoothly. It's like, what can I do? What is going to keep me uh, excited? And so what I did, I just worked hard, put together a big ranch down here in southern Kingman County, and have managed to stay entertained with different things ever since. So yeah, we actually uh I had a clinic up in Great Bend, Kansas, and we built a hospital. We started as a surgery center, turned it into a surgical hospital, and then for quite a few years, we were the only uh, full service community hospital owned by physicians in the nation. And that was pretty cool deal too. That was really cool. And we sold that to KU Health Systems, Kansas University Health Systems, a couple of years ago, and it didn't take them but about 6 months to ruin an incredibly great hospital. That's turned it into a bureaucratic mess, and that certainly precipitated my retirement. When the virus response started and things became chaotic, they shut my clinic down. I didn't practice for 5 weeks, and I had people calling me who were losing use and losing permanent use of arms and legs from herniations, and they needed injections that I do, and the hospital said no. and they didn't have anybody in those hospitals. They basically just shut down, and they literally let people suffer while they stood there in a defensive position waiting on something that really didn't come for months and months and really never needed to come with early treatment. So I just got where I could not coexist with those hospital administrators. The CEO would come in to talk to me because it was strict mask mandates, and they weren't going to get me to wear a mask. It wasn't going to happen. So CEO would come walking in there and close the door to my office and open his mouth, take a big deep breath to talk to me, and then I just destroy him. I just shred him. 'Cause I wasn't going to listen to their propaganda, and so we did that a bunch of times. And I thought, there's better things to do with my time than fight with hospital administrators. So I moved on from that. I was already in the Senate at the time, so it's all been good. But man, I mean the bureaucracy of academic medicine, the propaganda from academic medicine, I really got to see it in that KU health system as they took over a beautiful little physician-owned community hospital and ran it into the ground in 6 months.
Do you think that that could explain the I mean, aside from there's obviously corporate interests, there's just the general desire for control that's not new to 2022. It's just as old as the pyramids. Do you think all these things kind of played into why they so seamlessly were able to suppress the use of things like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine? Was it just this wasn't a unique phenomenon, is I guess what I'm saying. In my opinion, I feel like the ability for big pharma, for media, for all these things together to kind of in a lockstep manner suppress all discussion and use of alternative treatments. Do you think that that ability has always been there, and has it perhaps been there before the pandemic? I'm not sure if I'm wording my question correctly.
But no, I understand exactly what you're saying, I don't think this could have happened 20 and 30 years ago. No, I do not. Since I came out of medical school and residency, it's been very, very clear that hospital administrators, they wanted to own the knowledge base that physicians had. And doctors were historically very independent, very entrepreneurial, and they really went to work in the 80s and into the 90s in converting doctors into employee situations. And once they really tipped the scales on that, there's really that through the hospital associations, through literature, through legislation, through CMS, when they incentivized doctors, financially incentivized doctors to be employees of hospitals, that's what it tipped. Okay, doctors and everybody else, every other employee on the face of the earth, you are beholden to who signs your paycheck. And so they got between, hospital administration got between physicians and patients by making doctors employees. And so, yeah, KU Health System is an incredible example of that. They have all these doctors who are employees who have a wonderful lifestyle financially, and like since the pyramids, people have outspent their income. And so at least even the doctors, they can't go a week, they can't go a month without getting that paycheck. And so they were beholden to their boss. Their boss was the hospitals. And yeah, you could certainly slide information, and I call it reimbursement based treatment protocols. That's what went on in the hospitals, just reimbursement based. And the doctors, the virus was new. The right treatments were not completely known at the time. And so they were more than happy to go along with what the hospitals wanted them to do treatment wise. But the problem was they never got into an investigative mode where they tried to figure it out, try to come up with new ideas, new concepts, repurposed drugs. They never turned their brains on. They literally never turned their brains on this deal. And then I think at some point it became too late to turn your brain on, when you realize that you've just told people, it's just a virus, go home until you can't breathe and then go to the hospital. You know, that was initially, that statement initially started because doctors didn't want to see these people. Doctor, you know, who went into this to get sick and die? These doctors didn't. That never entered their realm of thought. And so it started out, the doctors responded by fear. Then they started responding by who they were beholding to, you know, participate, particularly within a hospital setting. Then they were too far down that rabbit hole to come back out because, you know, they're basically complicit. When you've sent hundreds of people home to get sick and ultimately be hospitalized and even die, you know, how do you these guys couldn't change. This was a, it was a bizarre deal. I like to blame it on the four things that came together perfectly was fear, greed, politics, and stupidity. And man, did they ravaged across the country, they ravaged across the world, and they left a whole lot of people suffering and a whole lot of people dead, no question about it.
Do you think that, yeah, the reimbursement, the medical care, it's I've interviewed Gerald Posner, an author who, amongst many books, one of his books is Pharma, and I actually interviewed him about that, I think before even the pandemic started to break out. But it was all about the Sackler family, the Purdue family, Oxycontin, Suboxone, and all the kickbacks doctors were getting, and like the, you know, the roundabout ways they would get kickbacks, and really kind of peeled my eyes back and wiped away any romantic veil I had about medicine, was that it was just as corrupt and perverted as any human endeavor. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have beauty and it doesn't have, you know, true human spirit, as do all things. But to me, that took it off the ivory pedestal, and I realized this is just, it can be just as evil as, you know, Apple changing the shape of the chargers on their phone every year. And it's like, hey, hold on a second, you're not just helping people communicate, you're you know, you're robbing our wallets. And it can happen in a hospital too. You maybe don't want to believe it because you see the guy or the gal in the white coat and you want to believe there's like a higher thing to it. But to say that, um and I bring this up a lot on this podcast, and it's not in any form, not in any like desire for retribution. I don't think I possess that. It's more so to prevent this from happening again. How or can there even be, and if it can, when will there be an investigation into exactly what all happened? I mean, it wasn't that it was a bunch of idiots who didn't know ivermectin worked or didn't know hydrox. These were competent people who knew these things worked, and they knew that their use would void the emergency use authorization, and thus untold billions of dollars of profit. I mean, doses administered by Pfizer or Moderna or AstraZeneca, Johnson and Johnson, or whatever. Do you think there will ever be or is this just going to be something where we wring our hands and go, those corporations, and then we just, you know, like after 2003, like we look back at 20 years and trillions of dollars and millions of civilian deaths, and we just go, I guess there weren't any WMDs, and there was just there's no closure. Colin Powell
Yeah,
just dies. Dick Cheney's just like 150 out on some ranch somewhere, probably the same
yeah,
as you.
yeah.
Will there be any? Will Anthony Fauci? Will anyone at the CDC or the FDA or any? Is there going to be any justice brought to any of this, or is this just, did the bad guys get away again?
Well, and that's a great question, and I rack my brain in regards to that. And you know, I really, I think the only two places we have any hopes of seeing this move forwards to take a look back is if we can take over the House and the Senate at a national level and have some investigations into it, and then in our courts, you know, in our civil courts. You know, right now I don't see an appetite among the attorneys to pursue this stuff, and that kind of blows my mind. You know, I know here in Kansas, back in, well, I guess it was 20. I was not in the legislature at the time, but this virus response gets started. Um, they think they got to shut down the legislature because nobody's going to be safe in that building. So they go through some emergency uh, management issues, and right then and there, before this thing had hardly even got started, the Kansas Hospital Association, the Kansas Medical Society, were in securing legal immunity from anything associated with this virus response, any kind of, and particularly the one that really troubled me was they managed to obtain immunity for, quote, failure to treat, end quote. So, you know, it's pretty damning that to a large degree their failed response was predetermined, that they knew full well that they didn't want to get in the trenches with this any more than they had to. But I find the fact that they were so forward thinking in their pursuit of legal immunity from failure to treat that that just bespeaks of evil to me. I was just dumbfounded that they knew to ask for it. I'm dumbfounded that they got it. And I'm dumbfounded that they're back. They're back now asking for it for another year. They want it through the rest of 22, and they sure might get it. They've got it in a bill that is just a very short distance from crossing the finish line and becoming law. And I don't think the citizens of Kansas in any way, shape, or form have an appetite to see these hospitals and doctors without legal responsibility. And they say, oh, it's not for wanton disregard. It's just related to COVID response. Well, that's going to be extrapolated to cover everything. And so, my real fear is that there won't be a post-mortem on this, that we won't learn anything from it. And that really kind of leads into a lot of my bills and what I've been involved in, because if I can change the laws, eh, to some degree I can keep them from doing it again. Like we've got last year we managed to get a bill in place to where if any entity, the at state level, county level, city level, you shut down businesses, well, whoever shuts them down has to reimburse everybody for their property taxes. Now that's not monstrous, but it is to the counties, it is to the cities. And I mean, in my county, they immediately had no interest in shutting anybody down anymore. So we've got some guardrails in place in our Kansas state statutes that they're going to punish government entities that try to shut people down. And in our state senate, we actually, it was Wednesday night into Thursday morning, we passed like, what was it, 3 or 4 bills that do an incredible amount to curtail this kind of failed behavior that governments that went after. We've said, in one bill we said no governmental entity can require masks. And I stood up and I said, okay, is it the intent of the bill that governmental entity means the broadest definition of the word? It means governors, county commissioners, school board members, basically anybody associated with the government. And the carrier of the bill was incredibly reticent to answer that, but I made her say yes. So we've gone on the record, what that means, and so we got that shut down. The biggest, and this, I think this is a great story, and I think this can kind of help people expand their thought process. In another bill is SB 489. In our Kansas state statutes, chapter 65, that's our public health stuff. And that's where the Secretary of Health and Environment and our local health officers are given all these rights. And think about those two entities, a Secretary of Health and a local health officer. Neither one of those are elected. And it gives them, in our state statutes, all these rights to mandate, to shut down, to quarantine, to imprison people against their will. So we've got unelected officials with the ability to basically imprison people. Think about that. Wrap your head around that. It's the norm across from state to state. It's the norm that we've crafted those laws. But I tell people we crafted those laws when 25% of the population wasn't crazy. 25%, at least, I think a good 25% of our population has no ability to reason intelligently right now. And so all of a sudden, this idea has become a disaster. And so in this bill, for lack of a more civil term, I'll say we castrated the Secretary of Health and Environment, and we castrated all our local health officers, and we put them exactly where they need to be. And I want people across this nation to think about all this and start to, because everybody thinks about it with half an ability to reason, realizes that what I'm saying is right. What you want to do with government officials is you want to limit them to the ability to educate and recommend. That's it. That is it. And if they aren't persuasive enough, well, then all that means the issue isn't big enough. And that's why they would have never been successful with this COVID virus, because it truly was a virus that 98, 99% of people were going to survive. And they weren't going to talk people into quarantining willy-nilly. They weren't going to talk businesses into shutting down. But in this bill, we bring that correct philosophy to Kansas, saying that these guys can't do anything but educate and recommend. What do you think of that?
I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome, man. That's exactly what it is, but you have to completely neuter them, because if they don't, it'll just, again, it's as old as the pyramids. You're going to reach for the next thing. You're going to reach for the next thing. You're going to reach for the next thing. And as with any accumulated or consolidated power, once it's there, maybe it takes a year to get there. Maybe it takes 50 years to get there. Well, then you have turnkey tyranny. And then you have someone who, even if all of that power was built by people with the best of intentions, then all of a sudden you have some Machiavellian guy that comes in there and goes, oh, look at this nexus of power. Here I am. And then you get another name. You get a Stalin, a Hitler, a Genghis Khan, and an Alexander the Great, and Napoleon. You get someone that just goes out and conquers. And
that is so correct. It's so correct. Nobody passes legislation with bad intentions. It's just the way that those laws could be used. And so, yeah, I wish I could tell you I was smart enough to figure that all out on my own. But I have an incredibly brilliant friend who, but as I was going, as this virus started, we were working on this together from day one. And as we saw this quarantining unfold and become such an issue, he was the one saying, Mark, they shouldn't be able to mandate anything. These, number one, they're unelected officials, but then we expanded that. Even elected officials should not have the power to mandate. It's educate and recommend. And the more he talked about it, the more I grabbed onto it. And from day one, when I walked into that Senate, I started talking that. And I'll never forget, we were at this. It's called the Truth Caucus. It's supposed to be the most conservative senators and representatives in the state legislature meet on a Monday evening and talk this stuff through. And we were hashing over how we were going to change the Kansas Emergency Management Act. And I start in day one, and I'm saying, educate and recommend. These guys can't have the right to mandate anything on this. And, everybody's kind of like, you could just see it, just sailing right over everybody's head. And so I say it again. And then later I wait 15 minutes and I say it again and explain it. And finally, after about an hour, there's one guy who's now our majority leader in the Senate says, I really don't think these guys should be able to mandate anything. I think they should be able to educate and recommend it. I said, you got it, baby. That was your idea. Go with it. Go
Hell
with it.
yeah. Hell yeah. Your idea, not mine. Your idea. Go take
Yeah.
it. Run with it. Whatever it
Run,
takes.
baby, run. Yeah, exactly. So it is interesting among a conservative group of people how that concept it takes a while to gain traction because we haven't functioned that way. But I'm telling you, from sea to shining sea, we need to reduce our government's role to educating and recommending and not controlling. Because you're right, that's where these Hitlers and such pop out of.
And that's the thing is, if you ever bring that up, people will look at you and kind of laugh at you or saying you're getting a drink too. Perfect
Great
timing.
points.
But it's they'll kind of and rightfully so, right? I mean, they'll kind of laugh at you. They'll say this isn't the Holocaust. That's and correct. This is not, and I'm not trying to say that it is, but you have to every fatal cancer at some point does start as a cell, right? That doesn't mean that every
Yeah.
cancerous cell is gonna be fatal. You're right. It's not every single time is it a Holocaust. You're correct, but every Holocaust was preceded by this, and so you have to proceed with caution. Every time this stuff is, I mean, look at the Patriot Act right after 9/11, right? That's great, sure. But now what's happening 20 years later when it's examining people's financial records? Did you support a trucker convoy? And it's like, what is this? This has nothing to do with Islamic terrorism, but it doesn't matter because it's the force has been there. And again, that doesn't mean that it was put in there with some comically evil intent. In 20 years, we'll use this against the people. Maybe, probably not. Most of the time, it's not. I mean, let's look at 1933 Germany. It was a country that based from embarrassment from World War II. They felt that their economy was gutted by the Treaty of Versailles. They wanted an enemy, and they have a charismatic guy come in and say, I'm going to put you back to work. They didn't start with, hey, we're going to take a bunch of Jewish kids and put them in ovens. No, they started with, do you want a job again? Do you want pride again?
Right.
Sure. I want,
Right.
I love my country. Why? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Where do we go from here? And it starts and it starts and it starts. And then when it's over, you look back and you go, how did this begin? How did this possibly begin? Well, it always starts with it's the greatest of intentions. We're going to do this wonderful thing. We're going to, we're going to have the Department of Homeland Security. They're going to protect us from terrorism. Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And then 20 years down the road, when you have fusion centers in every state working with the FBI, and you're going, what is this? They have detention centers? National Defense Authorization Act 2012. They can suspend the writ of habeas corpus? Huh? It didn't start with in 10 years there's going to be a virus and we're going to arrest the anti-vax. No. I mean, if it did, then that's brilliant. But no,
Yeah.
it starts with, I mean, even Eisenhower and the military industrial complex. I mean, FDR's War Powers Act, I mean, it started to consolidate all of our manufacturing power to build Liberty ships and build planes every hour and 6 minutes. Lockheed Martin could pump out a P-51. It was used to go fight the Nazis and to fight the Imperial Japanese. Wonderful, great, yeah, we got to start that way. Where did it go within 15 years? You have Eisenhower giving a speech 3 days before Kennedy takes office saying, beware of the military industrial complex. And then we see Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. And yeah, you go, oh, yeah, it started with the best of intentions. And to me, so when I go on these rants and people kind of raise an eyebrow and look at me and they're like, dude, it's just a virus, it's just a mask. I do believe that it is just a virus, it is just a mask. And I do believe that people pushing these bills genuinely think they're doing the right thing. However, I look back at I don't look back at just America. I look back at the entirety of human history. And this is always how it starts. Every fatal tumor started with one cancer cell. That doesn't mean every cancer cell is going to be a tumor. Sure. But the end always starts like this. So you have to keep an open mind and you have to be on the defensive for it. And yeah, it starts with we're mandating a vaccine. All right, sure. In 20 years, when we're wondering why, how come I can't do this if I don't get my annual checkup and 19 mRNA vaccines? Well, it happened because your grandparents didn't have the balls to stand up during the pandemic. So I don't really know where I was going with that rant, but yeah,
Well,
no, it starts with the best
no,
of intentions.
that's a great point. I want to tell you a quick story.
Sure.
It's a cool story. It came up today. It's amazing the way, my family was talking about this morning and how applicable it is to what you said a minute ago. I've got a dear friend. I grew up with him. I grew up in Enid, Oklahoma, about an hour and a half south of where I'm at right now. His name's Gerald Blevins. They own several grocery stores there in Enid, and he calls me a while back. It's been, I don't know, a year and a half ago. He says, "Hey, we got a new house. I want you to come down. I want to show you this place." He says, "This is the coolest house. I wanted to buy this for years." It was built in like 1925, I think it was. And back in that day, in that area, the people who were really wealthy were the people who owned the stores, like either clothing stores. They made fortunes. And so this somebody, so I don't remember the person's name, but it built this 10,000 square foot house. It's ornate. It has a in the basement a in-ground swimming pool, which my friend says is the only functioning basement in-ground swimming pool west of the Mississippi. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's really, just an ornate home. And so we had the opportunity to go down there and tour this house, and has this huge dining room, elaborate dining room with, wood paneling. And on each of the walls in this wood paneling that was put together back in 1925 is a great big swastika, a great big swastika. And he immediately says, Gerald says, Mark, I'm not sure what to do about this. This is a real problem. He says, but let me tell you the story. And a lot of people know the story. That swastika was a Native American symbol for prosperity.
Mhm.
And so Hitler hijacked that, and introduced that into Germany to kind of promote, like what you're talking about, well-being, development of their economy, building something they can all be proud in. And so here, in my buddy's dining room are these swastikas, which when they were put on that wall in the 1920s meant nothing but sugar and spice, and now it's become a dreaded representation of genocide. But you're so right when you say that this starts out innocently and then somehow it converts to evil. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I told him, if you tear that paneling out, I will not be your friend anymore. That's a piece of history that needs to be retained. So we see that, we understand that, we don't repeat our mistakes. And that loops us clear back to what we were talking about a long time ago. How do we prevent this from happening again? How do we do it? Well, and that, again, if we can change these laws to make it harder, if we can get it into literature what went on. But man, you're a kinder soul than I am. I do want to see some retribution for this. I think these perpetrators of fraud, these Fauci's, in our state, it's this Dr. Stites out of KU Health System who's the mouthpiece. It was our Secretary of Health and Environment, Lee Norman, who they canned and got him out of here because our governor's running for our liberal governor's running for reelection. So they're trying to erase that chalkboard and get that reminder of all the mistakes that were made out of the public light again. I'm very, very fearful that we'll learn next to nothing. But healthcare and doctors and the way they abdicated the responsibility of early treatment. I'm a dog with a bone on that, and I'm not going to let that go. And I'm going to, if I'm going to work at a legislative level and publicly, I'm going to pick at the people who did it. I'm going to pick at them, and I'm not going to let this be forgotten. These people, they're going to have to. It's like you touch a burner. If it's hot, you learn not to touch it again. If it isn't hot, you do it again. And it's my goal not to let these people do this again. If you're not a sound decision maker, you don't need to keep your position. You need to get out of the way, and let's get some people in who know how to think.
Yeah. Though that quote, those who suffer remember. And because humans have a finite lifespan, you have to make sure that society remembers, or otherwise your kids are going to suffer and your grand On a side note, what Hitler hijacked was a mirroring. If you look at the swastika in like every other use, and I could be incorrect on this, I might be incorrect, and it might have been, maybe it was partway through, I don't remember. But yeah, the Native American peace symbol, I think that's how you can tell them apart. Is I think Hitler, but it was for the same purpose. That's why they took it,
Yeah,
is they wanted it to be.
yeah.
But regardless, um, so for me, when I look at something like it's retribution, I no, I'm not a kinder soul than you. These people. I mean, what? There's 800,000 dead. I've interviewed Dr. Freed and Dr. Tyson, and they have what over? They've not over. They have a 100% efficacy rate with their early COVID treatment, which implies that I mean, the VAERS system is small fry, 23,000 deaths. Forget about that. 800,000 deaths. 415,000 Americans were killed in World War II. We're coming up on double the world, not casualties, fatalities. Yeah, there does need to be retribution, but I guess I couch it. No, maybe I'm just trying to make myself sound better, but I look at it more as like, let's say someone who never drinks alcohol, maybe they get dumped, their wife cheats on them, they get absolutely shit faced, they drive out to McDonald's at 3 a.m, they T-bone some minivan and kill a kid. That's terrible. They need to pay for what they did. Maybe they get life in jail, life in prison. Most of us would say like that was terrible. That was absolutely terrible. But let's say it was you. Let's say it was you, and it's like, hey man, I know Mark. What happened? No, he needs to pay for that. But it's like life in prison. He might be a reformed person, and I would agree with you. I'd say he is. However, which one is more valuable? The fact that we give Mark the benefit of the doubt and that he's reformed, or that we make this story known and it's known as a deterrent so that the next innocent family in a minivan who are going to get a Happy Meal at 1 a.m. doesn't get killed. That doesn't mean that my heart doesn't go out to Mark as a person. We all sin and we all make mistakes and we can all reform. 10 years in prison, sure, you probably become a different person. 20 years, absolutely. 50, why not? I look at it as it's not retribution against Mark for getting in that car accident. It's the innocent kid or future innocent kids. They deserve more of my of they get more benefit of the doubt. They just, by the virtue that they were innocent and they went through a green light and you went through a red light. So when I look at like a Fauci or a Gottlieb or a Walensky or everybody in charge of this, what's going on, suppressing ivermectin, suppressing hydroxychloroquine, everyone involved in the big tech companies that did suppress this unilaterally, it's not that they don't deserve to suffer. They do. They do. And you have to get what's coming. I try to look at it, I guess, so I don't let like because hate will eat your soul. Hate will turn you into a hateful person.
Yeah.
I try to look at it as they need to be punished, but don't look at it as a I got you. I try to look at it as it's so this doesn't happen again in 20 years or 50 years. So no, I'm not a kinder soul than you. I'm a better politician. I'm a slimy politician. I know how to make it makes me sound like a good person. I should be in the Senate. But yeah,
I like the way you explain it. It's making an example of those people. It really is.
Yes.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean that they shouldn't, it's like retribution in the Nuremberg trials. That doesn't mean that those guys shouldn't have been hung. They absolutely do. I would say instead of letting that eat your heart and be like, we killed them, hell yeah. Instead, it's hey, yeah, look what happens. You will be hung.
Yeah.
It's the same end goal. And it's also easy for me to say that because I didn't see the horrors of World War II. I also haven't lost anyone personally to COVID-19. If I lost a family member, I might be sitting here saying, yeah, no, it's retribution. It's 100% retribution. I get that. I understand that I have a limited mindset on this, but we're 45 minutes into it. We haven't touched on this. So you guys did just pass the medical freedom bill, correct?
Well, yes, we passed it out of the Senate. We had put it in. This gets complicated, but in Kansas, you can have a bill that comes from the House to the Senate. You can take that bill, eviscerate the contents of the bill, and then put your contents you want in it, and that's what we did. So we took Senate Bill 381 and I think it's 398 and put in a House bill. and I got that passed on Senate floor at about 1 a.m. on Thursday morning. And what that did, what that bill did was it encouraged doctors. It codified the doctor's right to prescribe FDA approved medications for off label use, particularly in regards to COVID. So that was the first step. Second step was it said pharmacists can't refuse to fill that a prescription that purpose solely based on a known or assumed diagnosis of COVID, because we had a big problem with that here, particularly through the chain pharmacies, the Walgreens, the CVS's, and Dillon's grocery store here. We we'd give people prescriptions, call them in, and those chains would say, no, we're not going to fill it, and so we blocked that. We blocked that problem, and then we said our Board of Healing Arts cannot launch investigations and persecute doctors for doing this kind of prescribing. So we what we basically did was cleared the field and kind of opened the door for the doctors to be able to get these medications in the hands of those. And this you know how bills are. Everybody tries to come up with some alternative explanation, and I just try to drive home over and over and over and over that this bill is only about preventing suffering and death. This bill is about it's not about the doctor. It's not about the pharmacist. It's not about a rogue board of healing arts. This is about preventing suffering and death. And good folks like Dr. McCullough and Dr. Corey had been through the state and helped get a lot of people's minds right, and ultimately we were able to get this bill passed. And it was close. And the other thing on this bill, which I think is real worth talking about, is the second bill we put into this House bill was in November. We had such a hue and cry in regards to the vaccine mandates going on and people losing their job that the legislature was forced to come back to special session. And it was the first time in the history of Kansas that we had a special session called by the legislature rather than the governor. And in that, we crafted some exemption language that was really good, for medical exemptions and for religious exemptions. And the core of the religious exemption said that, it is nobody's right to question another person's religious uh, statements. And so it made our religious exemptions inviolate. And so we took that new exemption language and applied it to daycare age and school age kids whose parents wanted them not to have a particular vaccine, and particularly COVID. So we really paved the way for parents to keep their kids from having the COVID vaccine forced on them. And that's noble work right there. That's good work. Okay, we know that when you run a risk benefit analysis on these healthy kids in regards to that vaccine, it's a simple choice. But we have a state government that's still promoting that on our kids. So between clearing the field for doctors to get ivermectin and such into patients' hand, and giving parents a good way to have a religious exemption for their kids, we got that bill across the line, and we brought some good thinking into the state of Kansas. And I told people the second it passed, I said, this will reverberate across the entire nation. And it has, and rightfully so. And it's a beautiful thing that gets me in touch with a great guy like you, and I get to have a bigger impact rather than just on the Kansas stage. Because what I'm talking about, is important stuff. And the way we've attacked it, and attacked it boldly, other people haven't had the ability to make it happen, and we made it happen. We're melting we're breaking ice on this propaganda, and we're moving the popular belief, the belief that the standard of care, this is what I preach over and over. I've said this a million times now, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to say this on your podcast. The standard of care in early treatment is not sitting on your hands and doing nothing. It's a multi-drug regimen that includes FDA-approved drugs for off-label use, like the hydroxychloroquines, like the ivermectins. That's the standard of care. If you're a doctor who isn't doing that, you are not meeting the standard of care. And you know, as I can promote that and make that the belief in this state and in this country, then these doctors, then their fear is gonna go away, their fear of job loss, of financial loss. Then they're gonna know they have to start treating this correctly. And so, you know, I am so thrilled to get to talk about this today with you, because you know the standard of care is not doing nothing. It's treating COVID with aggressive early treatment and educating people that when you have, once your symptoms start, the clock's ticking. Clock's ticking on a bad outcome. Why would you wait and find out what the results are going to be? You start treating it ASAP. And you know, just think how different this would have been if we'd had like-minded people like me, like you, like Dr. McCullough, like Dr. Corey, and we had these public health departments putting kits together that could be taken out to the public and disseminated far and wide, and people could have started this early. We could have prevented so many deaths, so many hospitalizations. You know, the hospitals brought their problems on themselves because they never got behind early treatment. They, you know, in our community, they were against it. You know, their doctors were against it, and so, you know, just think of the difference we could have made. But again, the standard of care is early treatment with a multi-drug regimen. And you know, I got no problem if you want to take the Pfizer oral antiviral or the Merck. I'm not. You know, I've done the side to side comparison. I'm still going ivermectin myself. But this is a big opportunity, and I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you coming on here. Yeah, or you could be like me, nothing, no ivermectin, no shots, no. I had Dr. McCullough come on here and tell me you just need vitamin D, zinc, turmeric, and quercetin. And I was like, got it. I've been doing that every day. I didn't know I had Omicron until it was a week into it. I was going to the
Yeah,
gym every day. I was like, what?
yeah,
I'm also 31 and younger, but
yeah,
I think you brought it up earlier, towards the beginning of the podcast, and I think it kind of carries over is we can look at this big picture, right? And it can get very intimidating and it can get very demoralizing. You look at the size of like the market cap of a Moderna and a Pfizer, and it seems like they're all in cahoots with the Trusted News Initiative, all these multinational conglomerates, and you're like, what the hell am I going to do about this blatant violation of the Nuremberg Code? And if you look at it like that, you're right. You're probably going to do nothing. What you can do though is what can you do immediately around you? What can you do in your own community? And like, what moves can you realistically take? I'm never going to have an effect on the acidity level of the ocean. What I can do is buy a second trash can and make sure I throw the recyclables in there. That's a little thing I can do. And you talked about that with changing the laws to make it so that they can't do this again, make it more difficult for them to do it. And although that may sound like a compromise and it sounds like you're bending the knee, I don't think it is. Because if we hold, you know, don't let what is it? Don't let perfection prevent progress, or don't let perfect be the
yeah,
enemy of the good. I like the alliteration one more, but don't let perfection prevent progress. Because if we sit here and go, they either all have to hang from the neck till dead like Nuremberg, and it's like, well, it's going to be kind of hard, and you go, well, then we're not going to do anything. Or you can make a move in the direction. You can go, we're going to pass these laws. We're going to make it so it's on record, all government identities or governmental whatever, you know, nothing but educate and advocate, or educate and recommend. So there is something you can do. And then once you do that and you do it definitively and you show it work in your community and you see that there is an effect on the chain pharmacies, Walgreens, Rite Aid, CVS, Dillon's. I had on Dr. Keith Rose. You know, I've had on Dr. Fareed, and Dr. Fareed was on my podcast, and he was actually at the office and someone called in from the pharmacy, and you could like hear him on the podcast, him like arguing with the pharmacist. And then I had on another guy, Dr. Keith Rose, who's a doctor, I think former Green Beret. It's kind of a little different mentality. And he was like, oh, when they reject my prescription, he's like, I call in and I make sure they get their ID and I ask them their last name and I ask them how they would like to be addressed in court. And it works. And it's like,
I love it.
it's like, all right, sometimes you got to go in there with that alpha mentality. You can tell this
Yeah.
guy is Green Beret. He doesn't play games. But all this rambling I'm going on is, do you think that the bill you guys passed, could that maybe be, once it's shown to work and we did this thing, right? That was almost like the first mountain. We crossed the mountain. Instead of sitting on our asses now, let's look for the next mountain. The next mountain could be nationally, or the next mountain could be a smaller mountain. It could be, can we get another state to do it? Do you think is there any realism in that mindset to, could this now start going to others? I mean, look at the decriminalization of weed like 15 years ago in Colorado. It started there, took a decade and a half, but now isn't it legal in more states than it's not? Do you think that something like this medical freedom bill regarding ivermectin and regarding the chain pharmacies, do you think this could spread to other states? And is there anything you can do about that?
Yeah. I think absolutely it can, and there is a lot of states there. I think there's like 16 states with pending legislation similar to this, and yeah, no, it's a funny deal. I've been to a few of these legislative summer get-togethers where you talk about ideas and such, and what you see across the board is nobody really wants to be the first to do anything.
Yeah,
And
that's always.
well, yeah, and which is not my mentality.
Yeah.
I don't, being fearful is just not the way I was born. And so I think seeing us get this through, and maybe it helps, we're having a doctor. I'm the only medical doctor in our state senate, and so I think that brings a bit of legitimacy that you might not have otherwise. But yeah, no, the people will be reading about this. They'll get their courage up and they'll keep pushing their bills in these other states. And I really do. I think the thaw has started on this propaganda, and I really do think within very short time that the propaganda is going to fall to the wayside, and doctors are going to get back to work taking care of patients like they always have. And so yes, I do. And if anybody needs me to talk about this anywhere, I'm always available to do this, because this is far more important than me. This literally has nothing to do with me. The good Lord put me in a position to have an impact on this. And I will swing at it with the biggest sledgehammer I can swing at it. And we're bringing it down here in Kansas, and I know there's other good doctors and legislators across the country working on it at the same time, and we're gonna change this thing. We're gonna bring down this academic mainstream medicine nonsense, and we're gonna ultimately change the country, change the world, and we're going to do it because we're in the right. When you put sunlight on the truth, all's well. When you put sunlight on the evil we've endured for 2 years, they crawl back into their holes. And
Yeah.
and I'm relentless in this. I'm unapologetic in it. Like say the good Lord has me here for this purpose. He's surrounded me with support and prayers that help keep me safe and in the right direction, and I'm not beholding financially to any of these folks. So they're not going to be able to hurt me from a financial standpoint. They can have my medical license. I don't care, but they can't silence me, and they won't silence me.
Hell yeah. And that's that America energy. Just
That is.
two middle
That's
fingers, burn it down.
that's it. That is it. And it was kind of funny. I was in a meeting. I don't know how long it's been. It's 2 months where Dr. McCullough was at. It was the first time I'd heard him speak in person and got to meet him. It was a crazy deal. It was actually Chris Kobach, who's running for Attorney General. was up on the stage talking at this meeting, and he does a great job. He's a great individual rights guy, and so he had the crowd lathered up, and he had me lathered up, and he had Peter McCullough lathered up, and so he was on stage. I was on the far left of the audience. McCullough was on the far right, and we were just we were in question and answering, and we were just bringing the place down, and we were all saying, say enough. You know what? We're not going to be timid anymore. We're coming at this full throttle, and there's going to be a fight. And I loved it. That was an incredible day to get to, because what they've done, they've isolated us. They've isolated the doctors. They've isolated us malcontents. But now we're coming together. We're getting on the same networks. We're networking. We're talking to each other, and that just recharges our batteries and makes us stronger and lets us come at this stronger and more effectively. And so, all those folks like Dr. McCullough, like up here, Corey, like John Littell, those guys are heroes, man. Those are American heroes. They've sacrificed. They've lost jobs. They've lost income. They've lost reputations. And they've stood tall. They've stood for the truth. Those guys are absolute freaking American heroes, and to them, my undying respect goes out. So, and I appreciate your work on this as well. So this is a good fight we're fighting. It really is. It's noble. It's tough, and it's based in truth, and that's as good as it gets.
We'll close out on this. It's an analogy I always use, and again, it's I'm very aware it's an analogy because this isn't anywhere near the same as war. I get that, but I always look at something, again, in my limited 31-year-old mindset with no military experience. I always look at something like a Revolutionary War or a World War II. We're going to fight the literal Nazis or the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. It's very clear cut, and although it's a almost guaranteed death, there's something that makes it easier knowing that it's noble and righteous. If I look at something like a Korea or Vietnam, and it's not disparaging to the soldiers, but I mean, I look at like my late uncle who was drafted to Vietnam, and he would always recall, he's like, you're kind of just like, you're in your sleeping bag, kind of hanging from a tree branch, and you're like, why the hell am I here? We're fighting an economic thing, and it's 9,000 miles from my home, and the Vietnamese people don't even know what America is. And it's this sort of, what the hell are we doing? Why are we here? And I look at my friends that went and served in Iraq, and it's not even Afghanistan, and it's 15 years later, and they're like, wait, 9/11 was in 2001, carried out by a guy in Afghanistan who we killed in 2011. Now it's 2016 and I'm in Iraq. Why? And it's demoralizing because life is suffering. The trick is to find suffering that's worth it. When I look at where we are now, not only is our fight easy in comparison to you and I aren't shipping out and going overseas and physically fighting. What's the extent of my fight? I sit in a leather chair with air conditioning on and talking to a camera. This isn't a war. And more importantly, it is a war, and this is my war. I am so blessed that this is my war. But regardless of, be it me sitting in a leather chair or be you actually fighting, be grateful that it is so clear cut. It's so simple. Bodily autonomy. Stop censorship. You should be able to use generic alternative treatments with no patents on them that cost pennies and save your life. To me, we're so lucky that it's not, why are we in Vietnam? It's easy. Medical freedom, autonomy of your body. You don't have to take an experimental, profitable shot, and get rid of censorship about these issues. What more could you ask for? And then not only that, it's not even like we're fighting that, but we're actually going over there with guns. We're fighting that from a chair. Like, what more do you want? It's a softball right down the center, and you have a tennis racket. You can't miss, man. all you got to do is swing. And if you're going to complain about that, then God save your soul. Like, that's how I look at it is. And I think it's what you were saying. It's so simple. It's so universal. It has nothing to do with imposing or projecting your own desires or beliefs on other people. It's the exact opposite. It truly is like the essence of America. Leave me alone. I'll leave you alone. And that's it. That's it. So with that, you said you like to be called Mark, so I'll call you Mark instead of Dr. or Senator. It was a pleasure having you on. You can come on here whenever you want. I would love to help you out any way I can. I'll send you the episode when it's uploaded, and I'll see if I can't get you on some of my other friends that do podcasts that have a bigger platform than me. I can't promise anything, but I'll try.
Sure.
And I think
Well,
I think they'd be happy to help. Again, I can't promise, but I'll try.
Sure. Well, what a great conversation. I enjoyed every minute of it. And,
It's fun,
and
man.
you are wise beyond your years, my friend. So keep it up and stay on the right path. Good things are in your future, no doubt.
It's a very well crafted facade I put on. I look like I can do it for an hour a day where I really look wise beyond my years. Thank God no one sees the other 23 hours.
That's what it's all about, my friend.
It's
Good deal.
Fake it till you
let's
make
stay
it.
in touch. Let's stay in touch. You got my number, and anything you think appropriate for me to be involved in on other podcasts, let me know. Let them know, because like I say, I'm ready to burn down the house. I am not. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to shine light on the trees. So good stuff. Thank you, man.
Thank you so much. Thank you, man. We will stay in touch. I'll text you after this. I'll get working on that tonight to see who else I can get you on. And and if we can't get you on anywhere else, screw it. You just come back on here. Who cares? I'm my own boss. I don't have any team I got to run it by. So
that's as good as it gets. That should be everybody's goal, to be their own boss in some form and fashion.
Hey man, I pulled it off at 31, and
you're kicking butt.
I'll never look back. I'm in nirvana.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, pleasure to meet you, and great to get to talk to you.
You as well. Thank you so much, my man. God bless America. God bless Kansas. God bless all of it. And let's burn it down. Thank you so much, Mark.
All right.